Welcome to the Ad Nauseam podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, Ad Nauseam listeners, to episode 176 of the Ad Nauseam podcast. As always, my name is Dr. David C. Noe. The C stands for complicated.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Like the shoes that celebrities wear.
Those celebrities and their complicated shoes.
Exactly.
Man, yeah.
And I'm here in the bunker, the vomitorium. This is Vomitorium Central. It might turn into a kind of vomitorium permanent.
I think this is our Parnassus.
You think so?
This is the Omphalos. Yes.
Okay, so
yeah.
we got the Diet Coke flowing down there.
Always, yeah. You got yourself
a
sparkly beverage there,
something
too?
of that sort, yes. Right? We got the door closed, and we're ready to podcast.
I think we are. Yeah. Okay.
How are you doing, Jeff?
I'm feeling good, Dave. You're looking good over there.
Oh,
yeah.
Thanks.
Yes. I see a little bit of glow in your cheeks. I feel like spring has sprung. I think I'm noticing a spring in your step.
Really?
Yeah. Am I on point here?
I would say more or less.
Okay,
we're gonna spring ahead tonight. As
that's
you know.
right. I don't like that part.
I don't either.
Yeah.
Here we are in the early stages of Smarch, and they're already fiddling with the clock.
I know.
Why do they have to do that?
No, but I like the warmer weather. I like the bright sunshine today. So
we're supposedly going to hit 70 degrees.
Oh, I didn't see that. Wow.
Next Friday, 71.
Amazing.
Here in the state of Michigan.
Fantastic.
Incredible. And you're feeling well?
I'm feeling well, although I kind of got into it with my wife over the last couple of days.
Oh, no.
You know, it's
the lovely Beck?
Yes, I mean, it's not a big deal.
How could you cross that woman?
Well, it's so, sometimes if I'm like sitting watching TV and she's walking by, I say, hey, could you grab some chips or can you grab me a plate of cookies or something?
Because you see her basically as there to serve you, right, and to bring you food.
That is not what I'm saying.
Okay,
it's just like a common courtesy.
Right.
I will bring my wife coffee every morning.
Sure.
So and I noticed that she was getting kind of irritated. With us and she brought it to me, kind of put it down and kind of walked off and up. I said, hey, what's going on?
Should I sit down for this?
You might want to sit down for this, right? And I said, is it really that irritating, just me asking you to bring me some chips or cookies? She says, no. She says, what's irritating is every time you ask, you go into that ridiculous, like, Texas drawl.
Right.
Right. And I said, why do you have to change your voice in that annoying way? I'm happy to bring you chips, but stop using that voice. And I said, oh, you have a problem with my snackish twang?
Oh, Jeff.
Have we driven that one into the ground?
Snackish twang.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
No.
I think we can keep driving.
Right. Apologies to any first-time listeners.
We don't apologize to anybody.
Okay,
maybe a first-time listener.
Yes, exactly. It was no idea.
Is this called a deep cut or a distant callback or something like that?
Yeah, it's definitely a callback.
Okay.
I don't know if it's a deep cut anymore. It's one of our greatest hits that we're just ripping
That's right.
on. Right.
So we have a listener. His name is Isaac. He's a native Grand Rapidian.
Yes.
And he told me once, it was maybe a year ago, that he would like it to be just all brackish tang all the time.
Really? That's
one episode in which we refer to the acrid taste of most coffee.
Yes.
And contrast it disfavorably with the wonders of the ratio line of coffee makers.
So Isaac would like that for a full hour?
That's correct. Just one brackish tang after the next. And of course, the allusion is to the brilliant book by Mr. Peter Green, which is the Greco-Persian Wars, the lovely blue cover. And he's describing the Spartans, right, with Leonidas, the Lacedaemonians, at Thermopylae.
Yes.
And he's saying something along the lines of, as they woke up on that fateful morning and they looked across the plain, the salt breeze was coming up off the bay there with a brackish tang.
Right.
And one of us, it was either you or me, said, it's like the coffee that you'd get from the Dak and Blecker.
That's right, exactly. And then it just snowballed from there.
Yes.
And here we are, many years later, still ripping.
Snackish twang, crackish slang, trackish bang. That's right. What's going to happen next?
Who knows? Right?
I don't know. But Jeff, what are we talking about today? We're going to get to the shout out pretty soon, but what is our subject?
This one came about is, I don't think we talked about this on air, but off mic, I was telling you about a grad seminar I had back in the day on Sophocles. And it was in the seminar, we were reading the entirety of Antigone in Greek together, but we were also reading all the rest of the plays in translation.
Oh, yeah.
And I was looking at
the Antigone in Greek.
Yes.
And the rest of the plays in translation.
Right. So there are 7 plays of Sophocles survive. And I noticed that with Antigone in the list that my professor had, there are only 6 plays.
Yes.
And the one that was missing, the women of Trachis, the Trachinian women, was off. And I asked my professor, I said, well, why aren't we reading that one? And he just dismissed my question. He says, nobody reads that one.
Really?
Yeah. And that was it.
That's no good.
Right. I mean, and I've looked into it, and indeed, the general consensus seems to be is that this is Sophocles' least developed plays, and there's some question of why did this one survive?
Yeah, that is not what Jeb thinks. The Richard Claverhouse Jeb, R.C. Jeb.
Yeah.
In doing some of the research for this episode, I went a little deep into Jeb, and I've decided I'm going to read this play in Greek now, which I haven't done before.
Yeah.
Like you read it in English, but not in Greek. Jeb's a fan. And I also looked up H.J. Rowe's Handbook of Greek Literature, a work we have referenced sometimes. Also some very positive things about this play.
Yeah.
And as I was reading it, it was gripping. Specifically the character of Deianira.
Yes, right. I don't think I'm as enthusiastic as you are.
Okay.
I think you're right. I thought the Deianira character was fascinating, and Sophocles' treatment of her was quite moving.
Right.
And also quite unique by comparison. Mm-hmm. But when we get towards the end of the play, she disappears for tragic reasons, but she also disappears thematically, and that's
you think so?
That's what bothered me.
I didn't find that to be the case.
Okay, right.
And in fact, I had this before we get too deep into it, I guess, but we can anticipate a little bit, and that's called prolepsis, right?
Yep.
At one point, I thought, "Am I reading Euripides?"
Yeah, I had that same thought.
I had to stop and say, "No, wait a minute. This is Sophocles.
Right.
This is not Euripides," because of the way Deianira was portrayed. And because there was a moment there that was almost comic, and I thought, no, that can't be meant as a joke.
Right.
It's a quirk of translation, but I had to remind myself, this isn't Euripides.
Right. No, it was this. I think one of the things that really struck me about this play is how much it reminded me of so many other, not only plays but other myths as well. But yes, when I was reading Deianira, I thought there are shades of Medea here.
Yes.
There are shades of Alcestis here.
Phaedra.
And so to the degree where I know there's some question about when this play was staged, and
we're going to get into that.
I would almost argue for a later date, in that maybe Sophocles was even influenced by Euripides.
Yeah. That which is in itself a fascinating question. One of the most interesting questions in all of literary history, right?
Yeah.
Is to what extent could a master like Sophocles be influenced by a younger contemporary who was respected, but also in some ways despised,
but also a competitor.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
It's really fascinating.
It is. Yep. But we have a shout out to
Yes, we do.
Why don't you drop this one?
Okay, I'll get it started, but I'm going to need some help to take it across the finish line.
Sure.
He says, I write to introduce myself as a longtime listener of the podcast. So this is one Anthony Minima.
All right.
Anthony Minima. I write to introduce myself as a longtime listener of the podcast. I am a professor of medieval history at Samford University in Birmingham, Alabama, where I help to push back the frontiers of ignorance regarding the classics in their great books seminars for freshmen. So let's just stop right there.
Fantastic.
Should we stop right there, Jeff?
Yes.
What strikes you about this opening sentence? Well, a couple sentences.
I have to say, sadly, I saw Samford University just reminded me of Sanford and Sons.
Yeah.
And so in my head, I'm just
Red Fox.
But this is very impressive. Medieval history at Samford University and pushing back the frontiers of ignorance. I like that phrase.
Yeah. So I have a picture in my mind of Anthony there with a giant machete, and he's just in one of those pith helmets. Is that right? Maybe a big canteen strapped to his waist.
Yes.
And he's just slashing through the jungle of ignorance. And behind him is a train of students with their Hackett textbooks forging ahead.
Right.
Headed who knows where.
Exactly. Right. The image that pops to mind is like he's the catcher in the rye. Right? He's the one stopping the students from plunging blindly through the overgrowth over the cliff.
Is that what the catcher does?
That's the catcher. He's trying to preserve the innocence.
Is J.D. Salinger?
J.D. Salinger, right? But here he's trying to prevent the ignorance of going off over the cliff. So
fascinating.
He's a rye catcher.
Yeah, I'm also struck by the great privilege we have, Jeff. If I can be serious for just a moment,
please.
The great privilege we have that we have colleagues at other institutions, guys like this fellow and ladies perhaps who are really educated, who bother to listen to us talk about this.
Indeed. Yeah, it's humbling.
I was really overwhelmed by that, honestly. What a delight.
Yeah.
What a delight. You want to continue there?
Yes, he writes, I enjoyed listening to Ad Nauseam while gardening over the years, though as a product of farm country, I share Dave's ambivalence towards Wendell Berry. All right.
Can we stop there?
Now he's just sucking up.
Yeah, validation. I'm validated. I feel so vindicated. Yeah.
He goes on, I recommend it to many of my colleagues throughout our humanities programs. Nice. I even introduced a colleague in biology to the program on an extended road trip through northern Spain after a study abroad on the Camino de Santiago. And we remain friends.
I see. You know what that is?
What's that? That's that trail that goes across Spain.
No. I'm not talking about the road. I'm talking about the parenthesis. And we remain friends. Oh. It's a little clever dig at you and me.
Oh, I see.
See, he recommended the podcast, and the other guy still likes him.
Gotcha. I see.
Well played.
That is well
Dr.
played.
Minima. Well played. Keep going.
I have thoroughly enjoyed your recent discussions on Maru and classical education, as well as those on the early American engagement with the classics. The podcast has helped me in my day job as well as I labor to instill a love of classical and medieval works in my students. Mm-hmm. Pick it up there.
All right. The extended treatment, parenthesis, trudge, question mark, slog, question mark, through the Aeneid was most helpful as that is one of the required texts I teach every year. You got to love Samford University if they are requiring their students to read the Aeneid.
Fantastic.
Good for them.
Yeah.
And he says, it even helped me to better appreciate a text I find somewhat stilted and relentlessly deterministic. So now my students receive a more engaging treatment of this work thanks to you. Then he inserts some Latin. Quae nocent docent.
Yes.
You want to take it up from there?
Sure. I'm also an alum of 05 of the college that shall not be named. And I'm a contemporary and good friend of the Brothers Krogh. The Brothers Krogh. I remember them well. Yes.
Is that that novel by Dostoevsky?
Yeah, exactly. Those guys. Though I never took a class with you or Jeff, pro dolor, I managed a minor in Latin. Part of my undergrad Latin training at Calvin was interrupted by a study abroad to Hungary with Doug Howard, who secured a Latin tutor of Romanian extraction who looked for all the world like Mephistopheles. That's awesome. Which had a degree of menace who was already intimidating former Soviet instruction.
Nice.
Want to finish it off there for us?
Yeah, so apparently this Mephistophelian fellow was terminated by the KGB and headed over to Romania to teach Latin.
I guess so.
To our friend Anthony Minima. Yeah. He says, after nearly 200 listening hours of your podcast, I buy and assign all the textbooks I can from Hackett, parenthesis, not smack it,
good.
Publishing, in order to continue to support your worthy endeavor. You know, Jeff, I almost forgot that long train of stupid puns that we made on Hackett Publishing.
Hackett Publishing, right.
But I must say that if Anthony learns nothing from this podcast, if he's not, expanded and invigorated in his reading of the Aeneid and Sophocles and so forth, if he remembers just one of the stupid jokes, I'll die a happy man.
Yeah.
Exactly. In order to continue to support your worthy endeavor, he says, thank you for all your efforts to keep the flame of the classics alive.
That's really fantastic.
It's so kind. Yes. Thank you, Anthony.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yes, and sorry we missed you back in the day. It was at this an issue of timing.
We were like 2 ships or 3 ships, I suppose, passing in the night.
Indeed.
So I think he graduated in 05 and you came on board there.
The following fall.
Yep.
Yeah, I just missed him.
Then I was there in 2007. Probably for him, probably for the better.
Probably for the best.
All right, but thanks so much for writing in and for yourself doing this important work there in Alabama.
All right, Dave. So let's dig into this play that apparently nobody reads or stages anymore.
Apparently not.
Although there are plenty of people who it seems would disagree.
Yes.
And let's dig a bit more into the business of dating this play.
So we're dealing here with a Hackett volume, actually, published in 2007 by Peter Mythic and Paul Woodruff. And it's entitled Sophocles, 4 Tragedies. And this is the one that has the women of Trachis in it. Or it goes by the Latin title, the Trachiniae, right? And as you were saying, of all of the plays of Sophocles, apparently more than 90, only 7 survive.
Right.
Which is a tremendous travesty. It's a tragedy in itself.
Yes.
Why don't we have more of his work?
We don't have more of his work. And then just think about, we know Sophocles lived into his 90s.
That's right.
But what an incredible, prodigious output.
Yes.
Right? It's amazing.
Yes.
That's what makes it in some ways even more tragic that we have this tiny sliver.
That's right.
But I mean,
we can be confident that the best survived.
Yes.
But when you're talking about someone who's so great, I'd be happy to read the not best.
Exactly. But that does it's a head scratcher. The idea is that the ones that survive are the ones that were deemed important early on and got copied and copied and copied. Well, but why this one?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
We can investigate that a little bit. Let's hope that the Villa of the Papyri contains more than just Epicurean philosophy.
Yes.
Could there? I mean, I like Epicurean philosophy, but it'd be great to have another Sophoclean play.
We do. We got to do an episode on that.
Be astounding.
On that discovery.
Maybe on site. So we're going to look at the introduction to this wonderful Hackett volume, 4 Tragedies, Meinecke and Woodruff, and it's page number 14. Mm-hmm. And they say, for a thorough discussion of the dating of women of Trachis, see Easterling. So this is a well-known scholar of Greek tragedy, and Easterling says any date between 457 and say 430 would not be implausible. So 457 down to 430. Why is the date, Jeff, 430 so important?
Well, I mean, that's right at the beginning of the Peloponnesian War.
Yeah, that's right. The plague,
right?
It's right in there.
Right in there. And I believe that, Oedipus, the king, is staged 2 years after that, 428, I believe.
That's correct.
429.
Yes. Yeah, so this is during the Pentakontaiteia, the 50-year reign of Heracles, right? Many scholars nowadays would prefer the earlier half of that period, says Easterling. So put it back somewhere in the 450s?
450s. My sense is from what the reading I was doing, is because so many scholars think that this play is significantly more undeveloped than his others, that it's reflective of a younger man.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
You know, part of the theory that leads to that interpretation is that a poet inevitably grows and improves and develops in certain ways.
Right.
And I don't know if you can apply such an interpretation to someone like Sophocles.
No, and I think just generally in terms of lots of arts, the opposite is quite true.
You're right.
Like often
you're going to say the sophomore album, right?
The sophomore, exactly. It's often the best work is done early on. Or if you think of
lightning never strikes twice.
Einstein, did his best.
Yes.
Physics when he was 21, right? So I don't necessarily, exactly. Things don't always get better.
No, they don't.
No.
And it's Conte, our friend who wrote his Latin literature, Conte, who says it's mostly owing to Virgil that people expect younger works and earlier works to be less mature, and an artist's final work to be the most mature and developed, because that's the clear progression of the Eclogues, the Georgics, the Aeneid,
right?
For sure,
right.
And so Conte makes the point: this is not universal.
Yeah,
it was the success of Virgil that seems to have conditioned the West, to believe that kind of thing.
Yeah, right? and Virgil died comparatively young. I think if he had lived longer, he might have laid an egg or two. Right?
Well, sure, it's definitely possible. Yeah. And as again, I was rummaging around through Jeb a little bit, because he has the text of the Trachiniae. He's got a translation, notes, commentary, the whole 9 yards. He distinguishes, maybe if we do a second episode, we'll bring this in, but on the Trachiniae, he distinguishes between 3 different periods of development in Sophocles as an artist.
Okay.
So this is apparently standard interpretation of Sophocles. And so it's on that basis that one thinks the Women of Trachis belongs to the end of the first stage, maybe beginning of the second.
Okay, all right.
But you and I both had the response or the reaction when we were reading it that, wait a minute, am I reading Euripides?
Right.
Which would kind of argue for a later date.
Yeah, indeed. It struck me as reading so modernly as Euripides does when I compare him to, especially reading Aeschylus and a lot of Sophocles.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So in any event, sometime between 457 and 430, not exactly sure where to place it.
Yeah.
But Jeff, you have an opening quote. I don't know if this still counts as the opening, but let's do it.
Right. So this is from an article from 1991 by one Marlene Reisman from the journal Hermes, entitled "Deianira's Moral Behavior in the Context of the Natural Laws in Sophocles' Trachiniae."
The title alone catches me, Jeff.
Of the article?
Yes, because I really like the concept of natural law. As we can see in Sophocles' Antigone, especially.
Yeah.
So if it's here in the Trachiniae, I'd like to meet it.
Like to meet it, yeah. So this is from the very opening paragraph of that article. The tradition of criticism on Sophocles' Trachiniae has centered upon the figure of Deianira or Heracles or both. Whatever the case, Deianira is usually regarded as an innocent, naive, trusting woman in whom there is complete absence of malevolent thoughts. So just while we're there,
right.
I'm just curious, kind of, what was your takeaway of Deianira? So from other things that I was reading, some people find her, that aspect of her very heroic, right. And some people find that just kind of turns her into a wallflower.
Yes. I frankly wasn't sure what to think as I'm reading through it. And, the listener should understand that the generally accepted notion for enjoying Greek tragedy is not to be surprised about the plot twists.
Yes.
In other words, everybody knows the plot of the story.
Exactly.
These poets are recycling well-known stories, and it's either never the case or only very rarely that they will introduce any plot innovation.
Yes.
So that it plays out just naturally, right? So I knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And yet when I got to Deianira talking about her competitor, Iole, and when she says things along the lines of, well, of course Heracles is going to fall in love with her because she's gorgeous and he can't control himself and he's slept with many other women and I don't begrudge him that, I started to get a little bit of apprehension in my stomach, thinking, can she really believe that? Is she really that blasé, right? Or that apathetic to her husband's philandering?
Yeah.
And then immediately a second thought entered my mind, which is, careful, right? Maybe I'm reading into this a different kind of morality conditioned by my own Christian faith or by some, I don't know, late 20th, early 21st century expectation. Mm-hmm. How would it have hit, right, in the minds of Sophocles' contemporaries?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's kind of where I left it. And I also had this sense of foreboding that it's a character like Medea here, right? So she's pretending to be fine with it.
Right.
But as Medea with Jason, Deianira is plotting something. And then as we went further on through the play, I'm thinking, could she be so stupid as to believe that the cloak, I'm revealing plot lines here, right? The cloak that Nessus gave her, that poison wouldn't kill him?
Right.
How could she be so stupid?
That does seem really naive.
Yeah,
here.
Beggars belief.
But and I think that's where the comparison with Medea parts ways. I can't imagine Deianira killing her children, right?
But she doesn't have any, right? Well, yes, she does. Hylas, sorry.
Right.
Plus many others.
But I can't imagine that thought even entering her mind as a way of taking revenge on Heracles for his infidelities, right?
Well, but her children are grown up. So we're not comparing apples and oranges, right?
No.
The children of Medea are, in the Euripidean tale, are very small children.
They are. But there's also the difference that, a large part of, I think, of how Medea is portrayed, not just in Euripides, but elsewhere, is it's infused with the fact that she's not Greek.
Okay.
She is an other.
Whereas Deianira is completely Greek.
Right. So, I mean, I was very drawn in by her innocence. And that if I may make a current pop culture reference.
Johnny Pop?
Right.
Current?
Yes. Right. So
you're probably going to lose me here.
Probably. Have you heard of this movie that came out fairly recently called The Substance?
No.
With Demi Moore?
The Substance?
Yes.
No, I haven't.
And Demi Moore played...
Is it Aristotelian kind of thing?
No.
Okay.
No. But Demi Moore, you know who Demi Moore is, right?
Yes.
Okay. She plays an actress who is getting older, and so she's lost the bloom of her youth, and so therefore she's kind of lost her cachet in a culture that celebrates particularly feminine, youthful beauty.
Yeah.
And she is offered this mysterious substance by which she can kind of almost split her identity into two. And she becomes kind of a rival with her former younger self in this mysterious kind of way.
Is this science fiction, or is it not?
It is. I mean, it's
way?
kind of fantasy science fiction, but it's very much about. It's a story. I haven't seen it, but as I understand, it's a story about women in particular tying so much of their identity or seeing so much of their identity in their youth and trying to stay young.
I see.
And so I saw when Deianira, you were just talking about when she says. Well, of course he's going to find this younger Iole more desirable than me because I'm getting older.
Right.
And so that struck me as that reads very modernly.
Well, so, as I was describing my thought process, the third thought that came in is, I shouldn't be too quick to say that maybe I'm reacting that way because of my Christian morals or the time in which I live, because a deeper belief I have is that all people are the same at all times.
Yes. Yeah, right.
In other words, what Deianira is experiencing is universal.
Yes. Yeah.
Jeff, can you take us on further in that quote by Reisman? Because it seems quite insightful.
Yes. So she goes on. If this interpretation, that is Deianira as innocent, naive, and trusting, is sustained, it would suggest that Deianira behaves in accordance with the unwritten laws, that is, she acted from love, but unfortunately her actions have had catastrophic results. However, ambiguities of language employed suggest that her character is more complicated. It is possible that she has unwittingly transgressed natural laws, although she has attempted to retain her moral values. There are apparent contradictions in her behavior. She possesses gentle, loving, and compassionate qualities, as she cannot completely conceal her bitterness. Moreover, this apparently passive woman reveals a strength of mind which enables her to take action in order to regain Heracles' love. The nature of the dramatization is such that it is difficult to resolve the question of Deianira's behavior in moral terms at the end of the drama. Certain ambiguities, the mixture of emotions expressed and apparent contradictions relating to her perception of her reputation, all contribute to our impression of complications involved in determining the precise characteristics of a character's nature, in this instance of Deianira. But certain truths do become apparent. We do perceive an alteration, if not transformation, of character through Deianira's tragic circumstances.
She started to lose me, Professor Reisman, at the end. She started to lose me quite a bit. The earlier portions of her reflections on the character of Deianira were quite persuasive. I don't see a character transformation in Deianira.
No, in fact, she kind of goes the Jocasta in Oedipus route. That's right. She goes the Eurydice route in Antigone.
That's right. Phaedra and Hippolytus.
Right. That's what I thought. Oh, it's almost almost relying on a cliche at that point, right?
So let's say that Deianira is an innocent, that she never intends to harm her husband. She really is completely oblivious to the fact that the garment soaked in Hydra's blood from the centaur Nessus, that it is deadly poison. Mm-hmm. And it's just a charm, right? And so she's thinking, this is the way that I can get my husband back. Yeah. I'll have him put on this with its love charm.
Right.
So there's nothing in the play from beginning to end that belies that interpretation.
Yeah, I would agree.
On the other hand, if she is not innocent and she calculated to murder him because he has abandoned her for this younger woman, Iole, that's also completely plausible.
Right.
Isn't it?
It is. I suppose. I mean, I stick with the former.
So you don't think she's conniving?
I don't. I really don't. And one of the most moving parts and most disturbing parts of the play is at the end is where her son, who is so quick to blame her, right? When he finally learns the truth, he is desperate to convey that to Heracles. Yeah. Before Heracles died, he says, Mom, this was not.
It was an accident.
It was an accident. And I found one of the most heartbreaking parts of the play is how Heracles, he completely dismisses it.
Refuses to listen to him.
He does not listen to it. And that's where Deianira she disappears from the play.
Right.
It's horrible.
Yeah, so I agree. And I want to talk about those scenes in detail when we get there.
Yeah.
Our poor audience, if they haven't read the play, we're exposing plot lines and spoilers all over the place.
Right.
Hopefully that'll motivate them and draw them along. Where is this transformation or alteration in the character of Deianira that Reisman claims to find?
I don't know. I mean, I think let's leave that as kind of a cliffhanger, and as we go through the play, maybe we can kind of tease it out.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So we need to get some of Heracles' backstory, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, Jeff, but when I was teaching classical myth, pretty much once or twice per year, sometimes 2 sections in the fall and 1 section in the spring, it wasn't uncommon. After going through a myths of creation, some Hesiod compared to Ovid, then either the Iliad or the Odyssey. Mm-hmm. Then you have to deal with the hero stories.
Yes.
So I would always start with Perseus, and then we get some Jason, some Theseus, and always end with Hercules.
I would do the same.
Those 4.
Yep.
Hercules always came last, and you've got the 12 labors, and here the possibility for illustration, because these were back in the PowerPoint days.
Yes.
Do you remember? Do you still use PowerPoint?
I do.
Oh, you do?
I do. I mean, it's come a long ways. It's still very, very useful.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you use the audio transitions?
No, I didn't use a lot of audio transitions.
Well, eventually, when I felt like my PowerPoint slides were getting a little stale, I started to introduce audio transitions between the different slides.
Were they random and absurd?
No, they were explosions and things like that. So in the no. Sometimes you could have like the sound of a can opening or an arrow whooshing by. I mean, because sometimes in an undergrad classroom, you'll do anything to keep their attention.
Oh, indeed,
right?
yes.
Tap dance, whatever. Right. So you remember the old audio system in those classrooms at that institution that Dr. Minima graduated from.
Yes.
And you turn the volume knob all the way up, right? That's right. And then as you transition from Hercules kills the Stymphalian birds to chasing the Erymanthian boar, you've got some big bomb sound in between.
Right.
You should try it.
I should try that.
It's
right.
Great fun.
Exactly. It did. We kind of jolt the students and kind of keep them on their toes.
If they were asleep, don't fall asleep.
Right.
So that's the natural progression. And then it would always end with stories drawn from this particular tragedy.
Yeah.
Because it's his apotheosis, right?
Yes.
He's burned alive on the altar and he becomes a god.
Right. So like you were saying, an audience watching this play in the theater of Dionysus between 457 and 430, they would have known how the story was going to end. Right. There was always but I think one of the ways in which a play like Sophocles could introduce some originality is like, the audience coming in says, well, I know many versions of this story.
Correct.
What aspect is Sophocles going to draw out? What is he going to expand? I think that's where that's where the tension would be.
What's he going to select?
Right.
And how's he going to present it?
Right.
So you can find an analogy in this to say the Star Wars movies or the Marvel, right? So for the Marvel movies, there's a huge catalog of actual comic books, which tell all these different stories. I haven't read them, right? But as the movies are put together, the diehard fans, right, the really core fans, they want to know, did this particular scene from The Amazing Spider-Man number 75, did it get referenced in this part of the movie?
Yes.
And they have a really strong reaction to it, either positive or negative. Right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Like the Red Hulk, what's he doing there,
What's that guy doing anywhere?
Breaks the timeline. Sophocles would never put the Red Hulk there.
Right.
Euripides might bring him out on stage.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the sort of way an Athenian audience, they would have responded, right?
Yes.
R2-D2 makes a cameo, right? And they all cheer because that's a deeply beloved character.
Yes, exactly right. I mean, all this stuff in the classical world is going to rear its head when Christopher Nolan's Odyssey comes out.
Oh yeah,
there's already complaints about casting.
Oh yeah. Well, I agree with the general observation that most people are making, which is it's better to cast nobodies.
Yeah, indeed. Oh yes,
because there are lots of talented actors who are unknown.
Right.
And if you want someone to inhabit the character, I don't want to think that this is, that Hector just is doing Mission Impossible 8, right? If he's being played by Tom Cruise. I don't want to think about the character's backlog.
Right. So I think right now, Matt Damon is slated to play Odysseus. I mean, and he's also great. There's Good Will Hunting.
Yeah, exactly.
Or Jason Bourne.
Or The Martian or any of the other things that he's done.
There's too much baggage. I'm totally with you. Find some talented nobodies.
That's right.
And make it their breakout hit.
But you know why they do that? And now we're way off topic. But we're talking about drama, right?
We are talking about drama, right.
They do that because they don't have enough confidence in the power of the story and the script itself. Mm-hmm. Right, the script isn't that interesting. The storyline isn't going to be great. So let's draw people with a recognizable actor or actress.
Yeah,
I think that's what it is.
I think that's probably what most of it.
Do you want to see Matt Damon as Odysseus? Well, no, I'd rather see Odysseus.
Right, exactly. Right, but they're counting on people saying, "Oh, I know Matt Damon, and I want to see what I know."
So who's going to play Polyphemus?
Good question. Yeah, casting what ifs.
Yeah,
I don't know.
All right.
Yeah. All right, so I think we should walk through just the kind of the basics of the backstory of Heracles, and then talk about what Sophocles is doing with those traditions.
Definitely, because again, in the myth class, I would spend 5 lectures maybe on Heracles
because there's so much.
Yeah. You got to get all the 12 labors in there, plus the par erga, the side jobs, right?
Right.
Okay, so take us through the basics.
Right. So I think one of the problems I've always had in teaching the stories of Heracles is that clearly. I think of all the heroes, he's the one that has the farthest reach, right? He's a comic character. He's a tragic character. He finds his
In the Alcestis, he's a drunken character.
Right. He's like Forrest Gump. Everywhere he goes, something's new aspect of Greek culture is created, right? But part of the problem is there's no Homeric treatment of the Heracles legends that survives.
Yeah.
Right. And so you have to it's scattershot. You have to kind of draw on all kinds of different sources to kind of paint the full picture.
Well, also like Forrest Gump, he's kind of the outrageously successful half-wit.
Yeah.
Right.
right.
Because I'm not saying the character of Forrest Gump is a half-wit, but in the movie, I haven't read the book, he's presented as a person with the particular challenges.
Yes.
But he always comes out on top.
Right.
Right. And that's the same for Hercules.
Exactly right. Stupid is as stupid does, as he says.
That's correct.
Right. So, So the way the story usually goes is that he is a child of Zeus, and the product of an affair that Zeus has with a mortal woman by the name of Alcmene,
who is also his great granddaughter.
Right. Right.
As it turns out.
Right. In the weird genealogies that.
Yes, because she's descended from Perseus, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yep. So bizarre family trees. And as often happens in these stories, Hera gets upset.
Right.
She doesn't like the infidelities that her husband is constantly engaged in. And so she chooses to take out her anger on the child.
Yes, but don't forget.
Yes.
As I'm sure you haven't. There was an attempt to endear her to Hercules, remember? Hercules was smuggled off and put to her breast so that she would accidentally nurse him.
Right.
This is one of those places where people say, wait a minute. Right? My students would ask, how does that work? Would she not know that this is not her child who's suckling? And I would say, I wasn't hired to teach biology. You're going to have to sort that out on your own.
Right.
Take the story as it is. Yeah. It was Athena, right?
Yeah.
Who took Heracles away and somehow tricked Hera into nursing him. And when she realized what was going on, Hera's not always that bright either.
No.
She took her hand and tried to swat the baby away from her breast, scattering milk all across the sky, thus the origin of the Milky Way.
The Milky Way, that's right. Yeah. So yes, Heracles, a similar kind of move from Hera that we see with Hephaestus, where she chucks him off Olympus by the leg.
And lames him, right.
Right.
But that gave him some kind of I don't know, I guess Hera's milk has some real potency. It gave him some kind of great strength.
Right.
And I don't know where the name came in, right? The glory of Hera. Where did he get the name?
I'm forgetting the origin of that, but it always struck me as it's his name is like a living kind of middle finger to Hera,
it's an insult to her.
So every time his name is mentioned, it's spitting in her face.
Right.
So Hera tries to get rid of Heracles, famously sending snakes into his crib. He is there with his kind of half twin brother, Iphicles.
Right.
But even as a baby, Heracles is a strong man.
That's
he
right.
Strangles the snakes.
So Iphicles, it means something like the glory of strength.
Yeah,
which is said ironically, but I think it's a funny name to give to a kind of also ran hero, right? Yeah. How do you feel about this? Well, Iphicles,
right? Exactly.
maybe yes, maybe no. It's kind of an Iphicles. And the snakes come into the nursery, right? And there's a wonderful fresco. I can't remember if it's Pompeii or Herculaneum, where a bearded infant Hercules. He's like 3 years old with a full beard. He has a snake in each hand, right?
Yeah.
And he's in the shield where he slept, and he's strangling these snakes. And there's a Hera, up at the top of the scene, looking on in awe, right?
Yeah.
While his human father Amphitryon and his mother Alcmene are also watching, thinking there's something wrong with this child, right?
Exactly.
The beard to me is the most disturbing part.
One of my favorite. This was a favorite type scene for ancient artists, and then well into the Renaissance. Is Heracles with the baby Heracles with the snake.
Yeah.
There's on the steps of one of the buildings in the Vatican. There's a kind of a chubby baby.
Oh yeah.
He's got one of the snakes. He's almost looking at it like almost like, would you be my playmate?
Right.
It's like this is fun.
Right.
Right. Yeah. But yeah. So Heracles demonstrates that he's got this massive brute strength.
That's right.
And bravery from the time he's very young. And then there's a handful, as these hero journey stories usually go, a handful of stories about the hero as a kid.
You have to have the prequels, right? You have to sell the action figures, so you got to load in all of the other stories.
Exactly.
He gets the music lesson from Linus.
Yes.
Right? One of the centaurs, and he ends up killing Linus.
Him, right.
Whacking him over the head with his trombone or something like that.
Right. Then, yes, and then he hunts the lion for the guy. I forget the guy's name. But who's got the 50 daughters, and then he impregnates all 50 daughters.
It's not the Nemean lion. It's another lion. It's
another lion that's decimated the flocks. And then, of course, these stories, then, all these women become pregnant, and that turns into stories later of various royal families tracing their lineage back to Heracles. So it kind of it bleeds into the real world.
Do the Winkles, you trace yourselves back to Heracles?
I haven't gone back that far.
Okay, you got a decent beard there. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's worth looking into.
So he grows up.
Yep.
And then his first wife is Megara, right?
Right.
And what happens to her?
Nothing good. And so one of the things I find kind of the most endearing about the character of Heracles, he's got this brute strength. He often reminds me of the guy from, is it Lenny from Of Mice and Men? Who can't control his... Oh, yeah.
It's played by John Malkovich.
Yes, exactly.
And Gary Sinise. That's a good movie.
That's an excellent movie. But Heracles, a big part of his tragedy, that he wants to be civilized. Right? He wants to be domestic. And that eludes him because of Hera's anger and other reasons. So he settles down.
In other words, he'd like to have a normal standard family, but there's this curse hanging over him, and it always breaks out into something terrible.
Exactly. So he marries Megara. He has some kids with his wife.
Right.
And it's almost like Hera's waiting for the perfect, horrible moment.
Right.
And she drives him insane. And in that madness, he kills his children. And some version of that story is he also kills Megara.
Right.
And
with a bow and arrow.
Right. And then you have that awful paradox we see so often in Greek myth, is that you could say today we'd say, well, it's an insanity plea, right? He's innocent by reason of insanity, whereas a Greek would say, it doesn't work like that.
No.
Right? He's insane, but he's still culpable for what he does.
Right. People are judged by their actions.
Exactly.
Much more than by their intentions.
Right.
Because actions, can't be undone.
And so Heracles does what heroes can only do in a situation like this. He goes to Delphi.
Right.
And begs for Apollo. Is there any way that I can cleanse myself of this?
Purification.
And that's where he's assigned the labors. And he has to perform them for this guy on the other side of the family, Eurystheus.
That's right.
There's also a story that when Alcmene is pregnant, that Zeus is he's proud. And he proclaims that the day on Heracles will be born will be a day where a great king will be born. He will be destined to rule instead of be ruled. And then Hera, being the goddess of childbirth, extends Alcmene's labor
for 9 nights.
She misses the day, and it's Eurystheus that's born on the day. And so he becomes the ruler, and Heracles is destined to be the underling.
To be the slave. Yep. Ill-starred from the beginning.
Yes.
So he gets the 12 labors, and they're a combination of killing and catching animals and killing and catching monsters.
Yes.
And we have to do a couple of episodes, maybe more on this at some point.
Yeah.
Because the stories are fantastic. And we've had the privilege of visiting many of these places, like in the middle of the Peloponnese in Arcadia, right?
Right.
Where he's hunting the Erymanthian boar.
Yes. Yeah. It's fantastic. And I have not been here, but I believe you went to Nemea.
Yes, I did.
That's one of the places I'm dying to get to.
Yeah, so I was driving a student from Nafplio to the airport. This dear student needed to fly home.
That's right.
For a family funeral.
That's right.
Her grandfather passed away while we were in Greece. So I volunteered, and I drove her from Nafplio to the airport in Athens. If you look on the map, you'd think that's, several days, but Greece is so small.
It is very small. Yeah.
And then on the way back to be reunited with the co-leader, young Kim, I just stopped off in Nemea because that's where the games were.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to see it. So it's fascinating.
Yeah.
You can see the site in maybe 30 minutes.
It's not huge, but I wanted the Temple of Zeus there. It's got some nice remains.
And I had a full dark beard at the point.
Oh, man, you were Herculean.
So I took some photos of myself there next to the temple.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. We got to do a full episode or more on the labors. Yep.
But speaking about selfies at Greek temples, it's time for the ads.
Okay.
This episode of Ad Nauseam is brought to you by the good folks at Ratio Coffee. Our friend Mark Helweg, the fabulous entrepreneur, he asked an important question. Why are home coffee makers so ugly?
Yeah.
And the follow-up question, what can I do about it? And about it, he did something.
Yes, he
invented first the Ratio 8, which is the flagship. You have an 8, am I right?
Yep. Wonderful machine.
It's the stainless steel model.
Indeed.
And previously you had the 6.
Yes.
and you also have the ratio 4.
Yeah, so I have and have had all of them.
That's right.
They're all fantastic. Yeah.
Can you name for us, please, Jeff, one outstanding characteristic of the ratio 4?
Probably my favorite thing is that it does not use kind of the scorch pad underneath.
Okay.
The massive hulking flagon that keeps the coffee pure and warm for hours.
So that's on the 8.
That's on the 8. Yeah.
Right. Now you don't have a hulking flagon. You have whatever the opposite of a hulking flagon would be. A lurking flagon? I don't know. But are you using that one on your 4? No,
I am not.
What?
I'm not. I like to mix it up.
Okay.
So usually with the 4,
but I gave you that little thermal.
I do. I have yet to use it.
Oh wow.
I know. So I will use it, but with the 4 in my office, I know that I'm going to drink it immediately.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't need it to kind of hang around for a while.
So you're using the nice, lovely, smoky colored glass carafe.
Indeed.
That's standard issue.
Yeah. Now, how about you? I know that you have the 8, and you also have the 4.
Yep. The 8's in storage. I'm strictly a 4 guy right now.
Wow.
And I've been through a number of 6s. I've never used one myself, but I've refurbed a couple, cleaned them up, and been able to pass them on to friends, thanks to the generosity of Mark and our work on this podcast.
Yes.
So if you, a listener, you love coffee and you have, one of life's pleasures, which is a morning ritual to make your coffee, to sip your coffee while you are getting ready for your day. Maybe you're reading something that's important to you. Maybe you're looking at your phone, figuring out your daily schedule. Why not add some top shelf coffee to that routine?
Mm-hmm. So, listener, what we would love to have you do is go to ratiocoffee.com, check out all of their wonderful offerings, and if you want to buy something, ratiocoffee.com/adnauseum. Don't forget the V there. And if you go to that particular link, you will get $20 off your entire order.
That's correct. Select the ratio 8, the ratio 6, a little more affordable, smaller batch, the ratio 4. Put it in your basket, enter the coupon code ANRatio2025, get $20 off your order, up your coffee game, and establish a new and delicious ritual. So don't get the pods. Don't go with a Gurek machine or something like that. We would suggest get some local roast. A friend of mine from Pennsylvania sent me a delicious Colombian Cedar Shed was the name of the roaster.
Nice.
It's local for him, but then he mailed it to me, and now it's local to me. In the ratio 4, it was outstanding coffee. I can still remember the flavor. So delicious.
Wonderful. Check it out. Listeners, this episode is also brought to you by Hackett Publishing. Hackett Publishing, these guys have been with us from the very beginning of our humble little podcast. They've been around for 54 years now with their offices in Indianapolis, Indiana, and Cambridge, Massachusetts. And we encourage you all out there to be like Anthony Minima.
That's right.
Our shout-out guy.
Yeah, this medievalist from the University of Samford.
Yeah.
Incredible. He's buying books for his students, assigning them from Hackett, supporting the podcast, but I would say more importantly, getting his students high-quality versions of the classics in a variety of translations.
Indeed, including the text we're using for this episode today. That's and probably the next episode.
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about this.
So this is 4 Sophoclean tragedies by 2 excellent scholars. This would be Peter Meinke and Paul Woodruff, published in 2007 by Hackett. And each of the 4 different plays is brilliantly translated. As you were saying, Jeff, they've got notes in there, but the notes don't go too far.
No. Right. So I as we were talking before we put the mics on, is I love books that give helpful notes, but don't treat you like a child.
Yeah.
Right. They don't spoon feed you everything.
Right.
And so as
they stretch you a little bit.
They stretch you. As I was reading this translation, every time I kind of glanced down was a footnote, I said, "Oh, that's actually really helpful."
Right.
And it doesn't distract me from the plot and from what's happening. It's just really wonderfully done.
Yep. So character summaries, plot summaries, glossary, index, a very attractive cover. If you have never read any Sophocles, then this is a great place to start. So not the Oedipus trilogy, some of the lesser known ones like the Ajax and the Philoctetes, and the one we're covering, the women of Trachis, right, the Trachiniae. You can't go wrong with this Hackett volume.
No, you cannot. So, as I've said so many times on this podcast, I order these books for my classes. I have them on my shelves. I can't say enough about them. They're attractive. They're affordable. And
you keep one in your glove box, if I'm not mistaken.
I do have
one. In case you get, jackknifed into a snowbank.
Right.
Right, and you're waiting for the the little Saint Bernard to come with the barrel around his neck to give you a glass of rum. You can go on your way.
Yeah, I can pull out Stanley Lombardo's translation of the Aeneid.
That's right.
And flip through.
In case of emergency, right?
right.
You can read book 4. Keep yourself warm.
Exactly. Highly recommended. So do yourself a favor. Go to HackettPublishing.com. That's HACKETT Publishing.com. Check out all of their amazing offerings. Find the books that you want. Drop them in the grocery basket. And Dave, what is our coupon code for Hackett?
That's right. It's AN as in ad nauseum, and then the current year, which is 2025. AN 2025, and you can pick up a copy of the 4 Sophoclean tragedies at a great price. You'll get 20% off your entire order, and
you'll get free shipping.
Check it out. Okay, Jeff, so we're back into the play now, and where are we headed next?
Well, I want to talk about, kind of nail down where Sophocles, I would say, departs from kind of the usual structure of Heracles' mythic arc.
So he goes off canon, you might say?
Maybe. I mean, we don't really know what traditions he was working with. But so after Heracles completes the 12 labors, he's driven mad again, and he has to go through kind of more trials set to him by Hera, and then ultimately is killed in the way that the play describes. But in this play, Sophocles ignores the tradition of Megara and the children. She's not mentioned. Okay. And so it seems to suggest that Deianira is the one and only wife of Heracles. And
rather than the second wife.
Right.
I wonder what the reason for that is.
I think my sense is in this place, he marries Deianira and has the son with her, either before or during the 12 labors. So this is all going on. And I think he does this to set up Deianira as a much more sympathetic character.
Okay.
So she's someone who is, again, stuck at home while he's off doing his thing.
Maybe so that she is not compared to Iole, the husband stealer. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, because Deianira replaced Megara, but not in the same way that Iole is going to replace Deianira.
Right. So I think that by just leaving Megara out of it, right, we're not comparing the one woman to the other, and maybe we see her more as kind of the one love, maybe the one true love of Heracles. Okay. Right. That was my sense.
Right.
So during the labors in Sophocles' version, Deianira and their children live in Tiryns.
Yes. Have you've been to Tiryns, right?
I have. Yep.
In fact, we were there together.
We were. Yep.
On the top of the fortress, the Mycenaean fortress at Tiryns, you and I were called upon by a student. And maybe it was even Julia. Was it Julia?
I'm forgetting.
It may have been Julia. We were called upon to act out the Stymphalian birds.
That's right. So we were flapping our arms.
Flapping around as the Stymphalian birds as Hercules was taking pot shots at us.
That's right. But
Tiryns is the birthplace of Hercules. And last time I was there was in, I believe, 2023 with my daughter. Lovely summer day.
Yes, right. It's a fascinating,
it is really
a deeply
really
ancient citadel. Right, so in Sophocles' version, so after the labors, Heracles, he's off on more adventures, and he goes to a place called Ocalia, and there he apparently falls for this the daughter of the king, one Iole, and this is so
the king is Eurytus,
yes,
and his daughter Iole is a beautiful young woman. And Hercules just can't control himself?
Can't control himself.
Is that it?
Right. And so he asks the king, or demands from the king, that Iole be part of his harem. Right. A concubine. Her father. Yeah.
Are we supposed to, as readers of the play, are we supposed to develop a kind of antipathy then toward Heracles because of his libidinous behavior?
I don't know. This is something that always comes up when I teach the Odyssey. Right. So where does our modern views of these things, where do they part from how an ancient Greek would say? So, would Penelope have been fine with Odysseus's, years long affairs with Calypso and Circe?
Right.
Is that just the privilege of the alpha dog?
Yeah.
Is that this double standard?
Hard for me to accept that.
It's hard for me to accept it as well, right? And I think that's one of the things that's so fascinating about this play is that Deianira also has a very difficult time just simply accepting. I mean, she says it with her words. Well, I guess what else can I really expect? But it's deeply hurtful to her.
Well, in many of my online interactions with folks, I watch what people say and what they think.
Yeah.
What they hold. And a lot of my Christian friends, I think they would maintain the notion that if we have an objection, they might say, if we have an objection to Hercules' behavior, that is largely or maybe exclusively the result of a couple thousand years of Christian conditioning.
Yeah.
I don't think that's right. I react to that, and I don't think I'm being just contrarian.
Yeah.
In other words, I think you could say that, yes, Christianity has a more defined sexual ethic in the scriptures that has influenced the way people think, but to assume that the Greeks, were generally approving of adultery and philandering and all these kinds of things is also wrong.
Yeah, I
it's
agree.
just not how they thought.
Right. If you think about a character like Alcibiades, right, who is celebrated for his genius, his strategy, right, his charisma, right, but his libidinous part of it is almost always depicted as a flaw.
His downfall.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that the truth is actually more grim. That is that a culture can at the same time kind of celebrate roguish behavior, celebrate sexual exploitation, and condemn it at the same time.
Yeah.
Which is what I think the Greeks, what they typically did.
Yes. Yeah. No, I would totally agree with that. Again, in the backstory that Sophocles is using, the king refuses and says, "No, you can't have my daughter."
Right.
And even mocks Heracles for even raising the question, and which is not a good move. So Heracles he takes his revenge by killing Iphitos, who is the son of Eurytus.
So this would be his future bride. So he hopes his future bride's brother.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I think very interesting is that, of course, that would have been part of a tradition that an audience would have been familiar with. But the way it seems the story was usually told, it was Hera sending another madness.
Okay.
And Sophocles says, no madness here. This is just the main the rage of Achilles that takes over, and that's why he
not Achilles. You mean
not? But I mean,
you're referencing. I'm referencing Iliad 1.
It's like the rage of Achilles.
My
here.
mistake.
He's not a puppet of the goddess.
Got it.
And
so then he besieges the city, right?
Right.
Of Oikalia, and he's going to take what he wants,
right,
and destroy the whole place in the process.
Right. Now that happens later because there's still a couple of more plot points. So because of this, Heracles and Deianira have to leave Tiryns. They're kind of kicked downtown. This also kind of reminds me of Jason and Medea,
right?
Where they return back to Iolcus and they kill. They engineer the killing of Peleus there.
Right.
That people are horrified and they have to remove themselves to Corinth.
Right.
Same thing. So here they move to Trachis. And so thus the name of the play. So if our audience isn't familiar, often, not always, but the names of tragedies are often taken from their chorus.
Yes. Right? So the Trachiniae is an obvious one.
Right.
All of the comedies of Aristophanes, which are not tragedies, but all the comedies named after the chorus.
After the chorus, right.
Exceptions would be like the Ajax, right, of Sophocles.
Oedipus the King, Antigone.
Right.
In fact, I think all of the other surviving Sophoclean plays are named after the main character.
That's right.
But this was named after the chorus, which is made up of the young ladies of Trachis, where this play takes place.
And it's not even clear in each instance that the playwright gave the title.
Right.
Often the titles are just what have come down to us from tradition.
Exactly. Yeah. And so Trachis, if you look at for it on a map, audience, this is not far from the famous pass at Thermopylae. Right.
So east of Thebes, well north of Athens.
Indeed. Okay. Exactly. Yep. So because of this killing of the son, Heracles has to serve Omphale, the Lydian queen, for a year. And again, this reminds me of Alcestis.
Yes.
Apollo had to cool his heels for a year serving Admetus because of what he had done against Zeus.
Yes.
Right. And so after that year is done, Heracles is still hanging on to this rage, and that's when he marches on Eurytus' kingdom.
Yes, at Oikalia.
Kills everybody, decimates the city, and takes Iole and a number other of women in the town captive. And so when the play opens, we soon learn that Heracles is on his way back to Trachis to reunite with his son and with his wife Deianira, but he's got all of these slaves in tow, or actually has sent them on ahead of him.
So, Jeb's version of the Trachiniae divides the play very nicely up into 11 different sections. And you can get this PDF for free. Just look around online if you like it. It's not all in Greek. There's a lot of... The introduction, for example, Meinke and Woodruff say, the introduction in Jeb is excellent on the Herculean labors.
What do you know the date of the Jeb text?
1902.
1902, okay.
Yep, reissued in 1908. So the structure of the play has these 11 portions. There's a prologos, lines 1 through 93, a prologue. A parados, 94 through 140.
That's where the chorus comes dancing in.
That's correct. And then a lot of the rest of it is what's called sticomythia, sometimes pronounced sticomythia. So this is the back and forth between the chorus and the individual characters. And I like to compare it to the blues phenomenon of call and response.
Indeed.
Where the singer, you're going to have to help me with this, Jeff, because I'm not Johnny Pop, but the singer belts out a line, and then the instrument replies, right? Typically the guitar, and then the singer, and then back and forth. It's a kind of musical dialogue. Is that right?
Indeed. That's very well said.
Well, thank you.
I love that image. Yeah.
And so that's what's happening in the play. You have Deianira interacting with the chorus. You've got Hylas interacting with the chorus. And like you said, the chorus is made up of Trachinian young women.
And doing what the chorus usually does is they're there to kind of equivocate and worry and hand-wring.
That's right.
They're not really there to move the plot along.
No, they don't move the plot. But one theory of the chorus, which, I'm not an expert in Greek tragedy. I've read a number of books, but so what? Is that the chorus gives the everyman perspective on the great characters. So the Athenian audience sitting in the great Dionysian theater there at the base of the Acropolis, they were seeing themselves in the chorus, kind of. The chorus would give the response. This is what we think. And so the chorus is kind of guiding the audience's expectations.
Yes. I don't know if not their emotions. Right. Yeah.
I don't know if ultimately that's the best way to understand it. But for me, at least, it has been a useful way to understand what is the chorus doing.
Indeed. And then also, like we've said, audiences coming in, the player would have expected them to have all of the plot points at hand. But the chorus will fill in some background,
right,
and give some comparative elements, or saying, this what's happening in front of me reminds me of this.
Right.
So
and they're often responsible for giving gnomic statements, kind of summaries of things that occur. So, for example, at the end of the Oedipus Tyrannus, Oedipus the King, it's the chorus, that gives the very famous statement, "Count no man happy until he's reached his last day. You can't tell what's going to happen."
Yeah.
And, that has a strong kind of moral overtone for the audience.
In fact, and that very same sentiment shows up in this play. It's almost like, is Sophocles, is he quoting himself, or is Oedipus quoting from this play, right?
It's really something, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as we start to wind down here, I think we need to give a little bit of the actual play.
We should probably talk a little bit about what's in the play, right?
Yeah, we should.
Or some actual dialogue or lines.
We should.
Yeah.
So I'd like to skip ahead and read a few lines of the exchange between the chorus and Deianira. And then before we wrap up this episode, we'll read just the opening of the play.
Okay. Yep.
So, Jeff, I think you have this before you. These are lines I just picked at random, some of this Sticomythia.
Mm-hmm.
These are lines 383 of the Greek, say 383, 384, 385. We got the chorus, and then Deianira responds. Is it okay if I read a little bit of that Greek?
Let's do it.
All right. So this would be in the meter called iambic tetrameters. Iambic tetrameters. So an iamb is one short syllable, bum, followed by a long syllable, bum. So it would go something like ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. And that would be an iambic tetrameter. Does that square, Jeff, with your understanding of this meter?
Yes, very good. Yep.
Okay. And if you're really interested in meter, and it's super complicated sometimes, you can look in the Jeb edition because he talks about it with great clarity. So the chorus says, Alointe me te pan te soi kakoi ta de, lathrai hos aske me chepontau to kaka. And then Deianira responds, Tichre poyen gunai kesos ago lagois, tois nun parus nek pepleg mene kuro. Kind of like that.
Nice. Nicely done.
And I think that my rendition of it, where I'm trying to get the longs and the shorts and observe all of the sounds of the individual letters, it probably sounds more sing-songy and trite than it would have sounded, with the pitches that they would have used.
Right. And
also the musical
accompaniment. Right, exactly.
So if you're listening to this and you think, oh, well, maybe he pronounced the Greek okay, but it sounds kind of silly and...
like Dr. Seussian.
Right. Yeah. Not how I expected tragedy to sound. I understand that. Yeah. And maybe you're having a reasonable reaction to it. But this is something of what it would have sounded like.
Indeed, right. So those lines, as translated by our Mythic and Woodruff.
Meinke and Woodruff.
Yes. The chorus says, "Death and destruction to all liars, and to anyone who secretly harms those who trust him." And Deianira responds, "What should I do? this story has left me absolutely stunned. So this is right after she hears kind of conflicting reports of what Heracles has been up to. And this is a significant plot point, which we will likely get into in our next episode.
Yeah.
And so Deianira is stunned, and I'm also stunned. Yes. Actually, I'm not that stunned that we spent an entire episode, and now we're just getting into the text of the play.
There's so much rich, wonderful stuff when you're talking about Hercules.
It's so good, right?
It's really interesting.
And so we will pick this up in our next episode. That's correct. We will dive into the play.
Number 177.
177. Excellent. Yep. But we got to get out of here. We are up against it. And as always, we have people to thank. Mishka, our wonderful engineer, who turns this around so quickly and makes us sound so good. And these guys, Scott Vincent and Ken Tamplin, are
they know
shredding
something
guitars.
about drama, right?
They do, right?
Their fancy rock and roll costumes and so forth,
and their complicated shoes.
Their complicated shoes, their dramatic hair and so forth. I mean, at least in the 80s when this stuff was so popular. I know that you listened to music that was produced after the early 90s.
I know. I know you don't recommend that.
I try not to. Right? I try not to. But that arpeggiated guitar, as you like to say, a combination of Eddie Van Halen and Stevie Ray Vaughan, just bluesy, beautiful stuff. Great stuff. Thank you, gentlemen, for sharing your talent with us.
Yep.
If you want to learn how to read Greek or how to read some Latin, please go to latinperdiem.com. I have programs for beginners, for intermediate, and for advanced students. Yesterday, we had our Moffus Hours, which we have every week. Jeff, we got to get you in there sometime.
I would love to
meet the folks.
You got people from all over, right?
Yes, we do. We
Drop it in.
Some folks from California. We got some folks here in Michigan. We had a young woman from Germany join us. We've got Ireland, sometimes Australia. We get together. We read some Greek together. We're reading some Xenophon now.
All right.
And answer some Moss-related questions. If you want to study Latin, I can take you ab initio from the very beginning. I use the Orberg text through an arrangement with Hackett Publishing, and this is easily the best textbook in my considered opinion. There's really no reason not to make good progress in these languages if you're interested in them. So check them out. Please also remember I'm running a special. If you enter the coupon code 10+, 10+, 10+ on the Latin Per Diem website, you'll get 10% off anything that you want to purchase. So please take a look and think about signing up.
Excellent. And time is almost running out, but we still have a couple of weeks left before our drawing for those of you interested in winning one of those wonderful ratio 4 machines. And so if you want to get in the drawing, write to Dave at adnauseam.com. Don't forget that V. And you need to write this in the text body, the word quatuor.
Yes, the secret code word.
Yes, and that is the Latin word for the number 4.
And it's spelled Quattuor, because you see, we don't want to just give something away.
No.
We want to pedantically teach you something in the process.
You got to make you work for it a little bit.
That's right.
Right.
So enter the drawing on March 26th. We will have Pricewaterhouse and Cooper or someone like that, some great accounting firm. Not really, but... make sure we're doing this honestly. And as the names begin to accumulate and I receive these emails from different folks, I'm filled with, the longing for each and every one of them somehow to get a ratio 4.
Yes.
I wish we could do that.
That would be amazing.
Wouldn't that be fun?
Right. Kind of like an Oprah. You get a
That's
ratio
right.
4. You get
Check under your seat. Right. You get a ratio 4. Yeah. So send it in and get yourself signed up for the drawing. Jeff, if they want to contact you, if they want to leave a review or subscribe, what should they do?
They should write to me, Jeff at adnauseam.com. Don't forget the V. And of course, you can write to Dave as well with Dave at adnauseam.com.
Complaints.
If you got complaints and suggestions. Or if you want to shout out, Mr. Minima has kind of set the bar high.
Yeah, he pretty much has.
So if you want to go toe to toe, we would love to. Or even if you just a couple of sentences, we would love to kind of celebrate our audience on air.
That's right.
Right. And Dave, in the meantime, while our audience waits on tenterhooks for the next episode, they can go to adnauseam.com.
That's right.
And they can check out our Lurch with Merch section.
Get a hat. Get a t-shirt that says Quai Nocent Docent. You can see Hercules on there, right?
Yes. Wrestling the Nemean lion.
That's right. Holding up the world on behalf of Atlas.
Yep.
Something like that.
Your choice.
Show the world that you're taking in the classics.
And keeping them down.
So next week, it's going to be Trachiniae, the Women of Trachis, Part 2.
Part 2. Yep.
And let's see if we can actually finish the play in the next episode. But why rush? This is great literature.
It's such good stuff.
So much fun.
And Dave, I believe you have our gustatory parting shot, yes?
Yes, I do. And this is from the philosopher, the literary savant, Mr. Jackie Chan.
Oh, yes, right.
Do you love a good Jackie Chan movie?
It's amazing some of the stuff that guy could do.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I think the favorite movie of his that I watched was Mr. Nice Guy.
I've never seen that one.
This is the one in which he actually broke his foot during shooting.
I've heard that story.
And so they had a piece of fabric made to look like a tennis shoe.
That's right.
Because his foot was too swollen and there was a cast, and then he pulled this thing over his foot and continued filming the movie, doing all the stunts. He's like a Buster Keaton, right?
Exactly.
Or some other amazing feats of athleticism mixed in with comedy.
And wasn't going to let a broken foot keep him down. Right.
Aristophanes would have loved him. Yes. He would have been all over Jackie Chan.
Indeed.
And Jackie Chan says, quote, "Coffee is a language in itself."
Well said, Jackie.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.